Good evening, students. Good evening, students, friends. Very good evening to all of you, students. This lecture, second lecture, this is the second session, I should say, of Audit Insights. Students, Audit Insights, जो हम सेशन कर रहे हैं for CA students, both inter and final students. You are welcome, students, to the second session. Students, ये ऑब्जेक्टिव जो है हम लोगों का, ऑब्जेक्टिव बोर्ड ऑफ स्टडीज का है कि स्टूडेंट्स ऑडिटिंग में क्योंकि फेलियर ज्यादा है तो उसको आप प्रैक्टिकली भी सब्जेक्ट की प्रैक्टिकल रेलेवेंस समझें आप, बिकॉज अल्टीमेट स्टूडेंट्स अल्टीमेटली आपको ऑडिटर बनना है, चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट बनना है और आपको एज ऑडिटर, स्टैट्यूटरी ऑडिटर, बीट बैंक ऑडिटर, आपको इंटरनल ऑडिटर, तो फॉरेंसिक ऑडिट्स, तो चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट का बहुत बड़ा रोल है ऑडिटिंग के अंदर। तो स्टूडेंट्स ऑडिट इनसाइट्स और ऑडिट के पेपर में चाहे वो इंटर का लेवल हो या फाइनल का लेवल हो, उसमें आप सबको मालूम है कि ये फेलियर इसमें बहुत ज्यादा है। तो स्टूडेंट्स इसी ऑब्जेक्टिव को ध्यान में रखते हुए, बिकॉज इंटरमीडिएट लेवल पे स्टूडेंट्स अभी आपकी आर्टिकलशिप शुरू हुई नहीं होती, तो आपको प्रैक्टिकल अभी नॉलेज नहीं होता कि क्या इनवॉइस है, क्या ई वे बिल कैसा दिखता है, कैसे ऑडिट प्रोग्राम होता है प्रैक्टिकली, कैसे ऑडिट स्ट्रेटजी होती है, ऑडिट प्लानिंग कैसे होती है। तो स्टूडेंट्स ये सारी बातें जो बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट बातें हैं, जो पूरा ऑडिट का प्रोसेस है, उस पूरे प्रोसेस को हमने A to H पार्ट्स में डिवाइड किया है सेशंस के अंदर। जैसे पहला हमारा सेशन ऑलरेडी हो चुका है, प्रिलिमिनरी ऑडिट एंगेजमेंट। अभी आज सेकंड सेशन हमारा स्टार्ट होगा स्टूडेंट्स, और जो सेकंड सेशन है वो उसका टॉपिक है आपका चैप्टर 2, इंटर का जो है चैप्टर 2, ऑडिट स्ट्रेटजी, ऑडिट प्लानिंग एंड ऑडिट प्रोग्राम। अब स्टूडेंट्स इसके टोटल हमारा जो एम है इसका, इन सेशंस का, वो है आपको प्रैक्टिकल इंसाइट्स देना, ऑडिट की इंसाइट्स देना, आपको डॉक्यूमेंट्स दिखाना, आपको प्रैक्टिकली कैसे ऑडिट होता है, कैसे चलता है, कैसे ऑडिट प्रोग्रेस होता है, वो सारी बातें इसमें आपको। तो आज के हमारे जो स्पीकर हैं सेशन, गेस्ट फैकल्टी जो हैं, वो है केनाज मैडम, केनाज वाडिया। प्लीज वेलकम केनाज मैडम। स्टूडेंट्स प्लीज वेलकम केनाज मैडम। शी इज केनाज, you can say good evening to you. Good evening all students.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, sir.
Kenaz Wadia she is a chartered accountant by profession, and she is working with Big Four. She is working with Big Four PwC at Ahmedabad office. She is basically practicing in audit and assurance. Her area is audit and assurance, and almost 12 years of total experience she carries with her. तो स्टूडेंट्स ये आपको आज पूरा सिखाएंगे कि कैसे आप स्ट्रेटजी, प्लानिंग और प्रोग्राम को आप कैसे प्रैक्टिकली चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट्स अपने ऑफिसेज में करते हैं, इस एरिया को कैसे हैंडल करते हैं। अभी लास्ट लेक्चर जो हमारा पहला लेक्चर हुआ था, उसमें एक स्टूडेंट ने बहुत अच्छा क्वेश्चन पूछा था, वो मैं दैट आई वुड लाइक टू आंसर। स्टूडेंट ने पूछा था, क्या हमें ये लेक्चर्स समझ में आ जाएंगे? क्या हमें ये लेक्चर्स समझ में आ जाएंगे? स्टूडेंट्स अगर आपको अकाउंट्स अच्छा आता है, और अकाउंट्स तो आप 11-12 से पढ़ते आ रहे हो, तो आपको बिल्कुल 100%, आप कभी मत सोचना आपको समझ नहीं आएंगे, ये समझ आएंगे, क्योंकि हम प्रैक्टिकली इसको प्रैक्टिकल फ्लेवर देंगे, प्रैक्टिकल एस्पेक्ट्स आप या इसमें डील करेंगे हम। तो स्टूडेंट्स आपको, हर एक स्टूडेंट को ये समझ में आएगा, क्योंकि बहुत ही हम एक इजी सिंपल मेथोडोलॉजी से इसमें चलेंगे, ताकि आपको ये पता लगे ये सब्जेक्ट प्रैक्टिकली कैसे हैंडल होता है, और बिल्कुल इजी लैंग्वेज में कम्युनिकेशन भी आपका जो मिक्स लैंग्वेज होएगी, हिंदी इंग्लिश दोनों होंगे इसमें, ताकि किसी स्टूडेंट को लैंग्वेज की भी कोई दिक्कत ना आए। तो आप इसमें बिल्कुल फ्रीली स्टूडेंट्स, आप बाद में क्वेरी सेशन भी होगा, बीच बीच में भी देख लेंगे हम, 1 आवर के बाद 5 बजे भी कर सकते हैं, कुछ क्वेरी स्टूडेंट्स की हम हैंडल कर लेंगे। तो अभी केनाज मैडम, आप विद दीज वर्ड्स आप इसको शुरू कर सकते हैं केनाज मैडम, और आप
Okay,
अपना
sir.
कैरी ऑन करें। थैंक यू स्टूडेंट्स, थैंक यू केनाज। Yes, over to you, Kenas.
Yes, sir. I'm just sharing my screen.
Yes, yes.
So my screen is visible, correct?
Yes, Bhargav ji. Madam is asking that her screen is visible or not. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So a very good evening, everyone, and thank you, sir, for the introduction. So, like sir mentioned, I am Kanas Wadia, currently working with PwC audit practice. So I have spent almost like close to 12 years into audit along with my articleship. So combined experience of almost more than 12 years. I'm a chartered accountant by profession, have done my BCom graduation from HLIC. I'm also PGC GM from XLR Institute of Management. So this is a brief background for me. So for today's session, today and the upcoming session, so we'll be dividing, since this is a very vast topic, we'll be dividing it into two parts, that is audit strategy, planning, and audit programs. So we will run through it in a practical manner, step by step, as to how practical, if you are on an audit field, on in your office when you start your articleship, or if you are in the starting phase of your articleship, what step-by-step procedures you are required to do, what insights you are required to carry, so that when you actually go on the field, you don't start from a point zero. You have some background as to what are the basic requirements, what you are supposed to know, and what you are supposed to be doing in that. So these will be our broad learning objectives for today. That is understanding. So whatever we'll be covering, that will be under ISA 300 framework, integrated with ISA 315, 330, and the various nitty-gritties into it will be going practically, like whatever is needed practically, not just ISA, but linking these essays and ISAs with a practical approach. We learn what are the pre-engagement acceptance checks. We'll develop a comprehensive audit strategy linked with our objectives. We'll try to master audit planning, including materiality, risk assessment, budgeting, resource allocation, and we'll create an effective audit program with a proper linkage. So like we discussed, these will be our basic objectives for the session. And these will be the phases in which we'll be covering our audit. So phase one will be covering acceptance, consent, and preliminary discussions for audit. A phase two will be taking a business understanding and preliminary assessment. A phase three will cover planning, risk assessment, and materiality. And phase four will cover the procedures for audit, quality control, and integration. So, of this and the second session, so whenever someone asks you, do you have, like when you go to audit, do you have an audit plan? So you don't have to answer to them that I don't even have a plan. You can say them that yes, I'm very well equipped and I have a plan. I have an audit plan. So starting with our phase one, that is engagement, acceptance, and preliminaries. So why we are starting with this topic is because this will cover our independence requirements. Now understand that this is one of the most important topic of our audit, because without an independent mindset, without being financially independent, without being independent in your approach, and without an independent mindset, any audit that you do, that will not hold good in the eyes of ICI or in the eyes of any regulator. So in fact, even before your day zero of audit begins, the independence begins. So there are several checks that a client needs to pass through before we even accept an audit. So maybe from your point of view, guys may be thinking when you walk newly into the corporate world, into your audit assignments, that do we even have to filter what clients do we audit? Like, don't we take up all of the work that comes our way? After all, घर आती लक्ष्मी को कौन मना करता है? But our profession is such that we have to make the so-called Ghar Aati Lakshmi also go through numerous checks and balances only to allow them to enter. Otherwise, it will be like you are doing like you are diving in, and after you dive, you check your parachute. By then, it could be too late. So you need to have these independence checks in place beforehand. So your independence and disqualification checks. So firstly, we'll go through our three mandatory checks. That is financial independence, audit independence, and mental independence. So financial independence. So this means that the auditor has no monetary stake or financial interest in the client, zero. Not even a single rupee is hidden in some relative's name. So where this could be of help to you, that is firstly, when you are going on an audit field and you are assigned a client, you need to check for yourself whether you are independent. And as part of our planning documentation, as part of our planning procedures, we need to have all of these independence criteria documented. So when you are given this task of documenting independence criteria, these are the things which we need to take into account. So why does this matter, financial independence? Because when your bank balance will be linked to client's happiness because you have a financial interest, then your skepticism takes a backseat. So the audit firm must be completely independent financially, no outstanding loans from the client, no kickbacks, no schemes, no commission, no favorable options, nothing. Total financial independence from the client. So now let's take a practical scenario that if a partner lends a loan of 1 crore to its audit client, then that partner's independence is compromised because the firm becomes a creditor with financial interest. So you will not be able to audit that client with independence. You will always have at the back of your mind that if I show something adverse, will this business close down? Will this business have financial difficulties? Or will my money be recovered? So that's a strict no. Then the next come is the contingency fees trap. Now imagine if an audit firm is firm saying that we'll give you a 50 lakh discount if your profit increases by 15%. So that's literally like having your audit fees linked to the client's financial matrices. Again, a big no. Your audit fee cannot depend on the audit result. It has to be fixed, and it has to be fixed at the start of the audit. It will almost become like you're paying your surgeon on whether or not the patient survives. So we don't do that. The fees is fixed beforehand. Similarly, for auditors also it needs to be fixed beforehand. So whenever you start an audit, whenever you are documenting whether your firm and you as an auditor are independent, fixed fee criteria is a must. Again, like loans, if the audit partner has some investment in the company's share, of course that person will have an interest that my demat account should look good, my demat account should have great profits, and that ultimately will flow down and will hamper their audit independence for that. So if the price share, so the auditor should not have any incentive what profit, what revenue numbers are being published by that firm, so that they do not have any incentive to inflate or deflate accordingly. So some of the ICI mandates around this is that the audit fees must be reasonable and predetermined. No contingencies on results, again repeating. No financial loans, no advances to the client. No shareholding, investment holding in audit clients. No family members even with significant shareholding on the client. Only after these criterias are passed, then and then only you can think of accepting a new client. So practically when you are there on the field and you are required to assess whether or not to accept a client, these are the basic fundamental checks you have to go through. Only and only then your second stage maybe of audit acceptance can begin. So next is a state of your operational, or what we say, the mental independence. So it's not just that you have to be independent financially, you also have to be independent from your mind so that you are able to make decisions very freely and from coming within the standard framework and there is no bias involved. So even if the auditor has say zero financial interest, but they may still be compromised, their independence may still be compromised. Say if the CEO is their good friend, the client threatens to fire you mid audit and that client is like say 50% of your total audit firm revenue. You will obviously be threatened by that okay, if this client goes away, if this client is threatening to fire me, maybe my firm could have a going concern problem. The client is too important to fail. There are family connections. So supposing you discover say a 50 crore fraud on the client, but then the CFO takes you down a guilt trip. Let's say if you qualify the report, our bank loan will get cancelled, we'll have to close down. Do you want to take this on your conscience that okay, the company closed down because of you? But our job as auditors is that we do not ever cave into such threats or to such reports. Our job is to say what is there, basis the facts and circumstances, and to issue the report in a very independent manner. Next is if the client threatens that they will terminate your engagement. That is why ICI says that the audit firms should not be overly dependent on one client, because if something goes wrong on that client, and then that client will become in a position to threaten you that okay, if you report this, then I will change the auditor. Then the auditor's independence gets hampered because they will also be thinking it from their business point of view. So, just to sum up, what are the ICA mandates for having an auditor? So, the auditor must have authority to conduct audit without any interference. The audit committees, wherever on listed entities there are audit committees, they should have an independent access to auditors. The auditor should report to board, audit committee, and not just management, because we are the auditors for all the stakeholders: banks, external debtors, external creditors, financial institutions, shareholders, board members, audit committee, and not just the management. There are no threats of termination for professional findings, and your financial dependency is not linked or is not dependent on a single client. Another thing what you need to take care in your mental independence is that you have not fallen trap on the friendly bias. And this is one of the main reasons why I'll go into a next point is that is why was mandatory firm rotation introduced on our clients. So next year, like that is 26-27, will be the first like major mandatory firm rotation year which will be coming up. So after Companies Act 2013 was introduced, so there is a mandate for companies which fall into a certain threshold that they need to have mandatory firm rotation. That is, a audit firm can only audit those categories of clients for only 10 years. So, like during your articleship or when you start your articleship next year, you will be in the midst of this phase, and hence it becomes all the more important for the current students and for our current batch participants to know about this. So first is a friendly buyer. So example, you have been auditing a company for 8 years. The managing director knows you very well. You go out for cricket matches. You remember each other's birthdays. So after a point in time, as a human nature, you will become more lenient in your audit approach. You may not intentionally, but you may unintentionally overlook certain issues which a fresh eye would be able to catch. So that is why we have a mandatory firm rotation, that after a certain number of years, that is either after 5 years or 10 years, at least the large companies are required to rotate their auditors. So that whenever the financials, the balance sheet, the P&L are looked at from a fresh eye point of view, they are able to spot things what maybe somebody who is looking at it from 8 years, 9 years, because of the familiarity bias, is not able to spot. So you may also say that, supposing another example, if we take, you are auditing a company for past 5-6 years, and now the managing director changed, and you are discovering some really aggressive accounting policies. So you will go into a mental bias that we are given an unqualified opinion for these many years. Now suddenly if I go on to qualify this, will the shareholders at large, will the public at large question those audits too? So what will the first human instinct come in, that you even overlook the current year issues to protect your previous year opinions. So these are one of the many examples of auditors bias which we need to avoid. So this is why even within the audit firms also, ICI has mandated that whoever are your key audit partners, that is the person who signs the audit report, signs the audit financials for a certain category, say for large listed entities, that auditor cannot sign for say more than 7 years, 5 years, 7 years, depending on the size of your client. So that even if the same audit firm is there, you need to have a new partner on that so that they can look at it with a fresh eye view. Another thing is that you need to have whatever we discussed currently. So all of these, you need to have it documented on your file, that how you ensured your financial independence, how you ensured your audit independence, how you ensured, or were there any cases which came up for all of these, and how were you able to resolve them? So, like I mentioned earlier, for mandatory firm rotation, so one of the big reasons why this was introduced in India was in light of a few global financial disparities which has had been observed across the globe. Hence, PCOB reporting, SOX reporting, everyone strengthened their criteria around this, and hence India also decided that with the Companies Act 2013 amendment they will bring in mandatory auditor firm rotation. So like I told you, you will be in that phase in your articleship when this mandatory firm rotation actually kicks in. So like just let's take a practical example as to why this is very necessary, mandatory firm rotation. So like first 1 or 2 years when you're auditing, you'll be very skeptical that okay, I want to verify everything, I want to look at everything, I want to carry out detailed procedures. As you go into your fourth or fifth year of audit, you will become a bit more relaxed, you will become a bit more comfortable with that client, that okay, I know the management, I know the finance director, I know the promoters, I've audited them before and not found any issues. As and when more years progress, say you audit a client for say more than 7 years, 8 years, 10 years, you will start becoming too comfortable that I know this business better than everyone. This treatment should be fine. Whatever work or whatever entries this guy passes, it will be fine. I've known this person for so long. I've known this company for so long. And if the same pattern continues, there are no checks in place. One day you suddenly discover that there was something major happening which was overlooked because of this lens of comfort that you were wearing. And all of a sudden you are in the midst of say a fraud, midst of something which ought to be reported, some scam, some fraud, you're in the midst of this. And this is the backstory for every major financial mishappening that you take, as to why in cases where auditors have not been able to detect this, it was because somewhere their mental independence was compromised, somewhere they became too comfortable, somewhere they put down their lens of professional skepticism. So the only point of introducing our audit planning and audit strategy with this topic is that independence is the most paramount important topic, after which everything can flow in. You can have excellent audit program, excellent audit documentation, very detailed work papers, everything is there in place. You have tested the required number of samples, everything is there in place. But if your independence lens is compromised, that entire audit holds no value. You will have to, like, even if this happens, the entire audit needs to be redone, because only and only if a person is independent, then that person is capable of auditing. So going on to the next slide. So once you are done with your independence checks, going back to our original example of our Gharati Lakshmi. So if you are that, okay, fine, from all of these checks, I'm fine to accept that audit, then you will have to make a decision. First is independence, second is the bandwidth to perform the engagement. That is why, like you will find that okay, certain listed class of companies will have auditors from a certain section because, like for a company which is geographically spread, like which has operations say in 20-25 plus states of India, which has several business lines of revenue, which is spread into several businesses. So for such class of companies, you will need to have the required bandwidth to perform that engagement. Just accepting an engagement, you will need to say maybe have an audit team of 50 people. Now, do you have those many people in your in working in your audit firm? Do you have the bandwidth to perform that? All of these factors will have to evaluate what is the scope, like if it is only audit, is it statutory audit, or do they need some other specialized services? If they need those, again, are we capable enough? Do we have the required competence to do that? Only if all of these criteria are fulfilled, only and only then you should go ahead with audit. It's not that any client that we're independent in, again हम उसको ले ही लेंगे, वैसा नहीं होगा. Independence is just the first filter. There are many filters which we have to go through. Ultimately, it should not become like you're auditing a company, say, which has 500, 1000 crores of revenue, and you just have two articles and one overworked partner who are auditing those, because then the ultimate result will not be an audit. It will become a sort of a Netflix thriller as to just running around, total chaos. So we need to have that required team to perform the audit. Defined scope, again, like we mentioned, whether it is Ind AS, IGAP. So say in your firm you do not have the technical capability to perform certain sort of, say, special assignments, consolidations. You need to also check what sort of capabilities your firm has, and basis that the engagements are accepted or denied. Coming to the second point, when we are not accepting, say there could be multiple factors, lack of independence, beyond the firm's risk parameters, other services being provided. So sometimes the most professional audit decision, yeah, then you can take is to walk away. Like say for example, if you identified some lack of independence, conflict in shareholding, some family connection, even some non-audit services which you are providing, which may hamper your audit decision. Like for example, if you are working on that client's ERP implementation, as auditors, we are also required to check their IT systems. So I cannot check something that I have implemented. So again, there is a conflict. Such clients will not accept. Whether that is beyond the firm's risk parameter. So every firm will also have, so whenever you start your articleship, just look out what are your risk parameters that your audit firm is carrying. That okay, we will not accept clients which are into crypto business because we do not have the capability to audit such business. This is just a small example. There could be many such even fragmentations in the risk parameters. So whether it is falling within those or not, whether again the client risk also, like whether there have been past history of fraud reportings, there has been a weak governance in the client, history of non-cooperation with the auditors, like the previous auditors have resigned for reasons of non-cooperation. Your fees was very low, so when we see whether in this much of fees will I be able to cater as an audit firm to that particular client. If that answer is yes, then fine. Because if your risk is, say, falling into the XXL category and your fees is falling into the XXS category, the answer will be a no, because you will not be able to do justice to that client. So, okay, so assuming that once we have accepted a client, it has passed through all of our checks and balances. So after that, it will not just be a verbal communication कि मैंने फोन उठाया और बोल दिया कि हाँ भाई मैं कल से ऑडिट पे आ जाऊंगी. It's not that. We need to have a formal invitation, formal board resolution or email from the client requesting our appointment as statutory auditors. So we are not self-appointing ourselves. They are actually asking us. So this is the professional conduct that we are required to follow. Eligibility and consent letter plus independence communications we are required to send. So these are all, we'll just go through the letters also in the next slide, wherein we tell the client that, okay, we are eligible to be appointed under the Companies Act. Against our firm, there are no open litigative matters which are outstanding. We have done our required checks and balances in place, and basis that we are ready to be appointed as auditors. Secondly, even after, say, this is the first year you have accepted the audit client, it does not mean that, okay, for the number of years, say for 5 years, 10 years, 3 years, whatever I'm appointed, I don't need to again redo all of these checks. Independence is not a one-time activity. ये हमें हर engagement में करना है, and we have to keep on like keeping ourselves updated. Can there be any change in this? Is there any facts and circumstances which have come to light which will impact our original assessment? So it's not just एक बार कर दिया, document कर दिया and उसको complete कर दिया. No, this is not what independence means. We have to be independent every single day we do the audit of that client. So it's not like every year you'll automatically do a renewal of your client. You need to recheck whether you still want that client, whether you're still eligible to audit that client. So are there any new conflicts which are identified in the current year? Any big issues in last year filing? So say last year you had a very traumatic experience. The client was imposing, say, any limitation of scope. There were unpaid fees. There were litigations. Do we still want to continue with that client? We need to reassess before starting every audit on that client. Say we audited 24-25. Now for 25-26, when you're again auditing, you need to ask those questions to yourself again. Is there any change in the risk profile of the company? Say they acquired a very big overseas operations. Now you as an audit firm are not present in that country. How will you go and audit that? Will your logistics be arranged? Will the client bear that cost? Will you bear that cost? If you're not able to come to a mutual consent for that, then again it will trigger a scope limitation, because if I don't audit that overseas entity, I will not be able to issue an audit opinion. So am I still the right auditor for that company? You need to ask these questions for every audit. Any certain related party transactions, any adverse news that has come in picture, any going concern issues identified. So all of these things we need to have into account and not just verbally discuss. You need to have this documented in your file that, okay, this was the first year, this was my independence assessment, this is what we discussed in the previous slide. This is my second year. Again, I have done these continuation checks. I have checked that all parameters are still being fulfilled and that audit client is still good to go. Only then and then we'll begin our audit. Then is NOC from previous auditor. So this is a one-time activity whenever you are being onboarded, say on a new audit client. So this is required to be taken from another statutory auditor, like the outgoing statutory auditor. This is a very simple but a powerful step wherein we ask our fellow professionals that whether there are any reasons why we should not be accepting this client. So if they flag any frequent non-cooperation, unpaid fees, any ethical issues, we need to understand that why was it done and do we still again want to go. So this is a very like a safety net which ICAI has mandated any new auditor to do, which is to obtain NOC from the previous auditor. So you need to send that NOC via registered post, and the other auditor is also mandated to reply to us that whether according to his or her professional judgment, whether we should be taking this audit. If not, then what are the reasons for this? So if your previous auditor has like the previous auditor before you ran away screamingly from that client, then then should we go smilingly again into that client? We need to evaluate that, and that is why we take NOC from the previous auditors. Engagement letter we'll cover in detail in the next session. Next is ADT1. So it's not just कि मुझे पता है, client को पता है. Audit is a regulated profession. ICAI regulates it. We will be appointed as auditors, say under the Partnership Act, Companies Act, or any other statute in place. So we also need to inform them. So it's not just that कि audit मिल गया है. You need to inform the ROC, you need to inform the government, and that is done via an ADT1 slide. ADT1 form, so that we'll check that. I'll open the ADT1 sample form in the next slide. So this is a list of some of these we covered in the earlier, like I covered it in the earlier slides. But this is sort of all the sort of threats. Of course, that list cannot be an exhaustive list because every time clients will also come up with new and new things as to how they can threat our independence. And we as auditors need to like keep on saving ourselves from those threats. So first one that we'll cover is the self-interest threat. So again, auditor holds shares in the client. So every clean report should not feel like a bonus issue. So you cannot hold shares into that client. Family member is holding any management position. A strict no, your independence is bound to be compromised. High dependency on audit fees. Again, uh, that is why ICI keeps the check as to you are not just having one client of which your total fees ka say 25%, 30% is coming from that client. Your independence is bound to be compromised because you will think 100 times before issuing a qualified opinion on such a client. Auditor has loans with the client, again strict no, total financial independence. Then coming to self-review thread. So auditor prepares the financials and then audits them. You cannot give an independent opinion on the work that you have only done. Designing controls, so you cannot be designing controls which you will be ultimately be testing. Again, a strict no. Providing any sort of valuation services which ultimately again you will go and audit. It's like coming into a circle that we are forming here, wherein whatever work I'm doing, that same work I'll go and audit. The third, you cannot give assurance to any third person by auditing the work that you have done. Advocacy threats, representing clients in tax disputes. So at one point, you just go in the tax tribunal and try to convince them कि मेरा client बेकसूर है, and then you are expected that you will report that as a contingency provision in your financials. That is not happening. Supporting client and loan approvals, again you cannot be providing these services to the client at the same time auditing. Familiarity threat we already covered. Long association, more than 10 years, you will start to have bias towards that client. You will have comfort glasses put on, not acceptable. Any personal relationship with the management, not acceptable. Gifts and hospitality, again, the client could tempt you in a like I'll take you to an IPL match, to a VIP box tickets, concert tickets, outside India trips. These are just some of the very few examples which could be there. We need to check whether before accepting any such favor from the client, will our independence be compromised? If yes, then you need to say no politely, that no, we cannot accept this because it is a threat on our independence. Intimidation threat, auditor replacement, again linking it to the high dependency on audit fees. So if the client knows that you are highly dependent on them, they may come down to a threatening position that okay, you cannot report this entry, you cannot report this fraud, otherwise I will replace you. Pressure to reduce scope, restricted access to records. So all of these things are outright no if you are facing these. Or as article assistants on the field also. Intimidation threat is something which could be there. Like the client could think, okay, ये बंदा तो अभी नया आया हुआ है, let me intimidate that person, like talking into hi-fi jargons, intimidating that person that okay, you do not know this, you do not know that. We as auditors, be it any designation, any position that we are auditing, we need to be independent at all times. If you do not know something, go back to your seniors, ask them, and then do the audit. We are supposed to be absolutely independent and not come under any intimidation threat from any level of the client, whatsoever may be the case. A management threat. So you cannot approve, like you cannot audit the JVs, you cannot audit the journal entries which you yourself have passed. So come on, that will be like a loop, and we cannot have that. Selecting accounting policies for the client, performing management duties. So these are all strict no. This is a very small list. There is a large list of this, and as and when the times progress, so there will be more and more which can be added into this. So that's why again reiterating, every day we need to ensure that we are independent for that client. So we'll just have a look at some practical examples as to how do these forms look. So this is the typical ADT1 form. So like you can see here, we have the name of the company. Say I've taken a publicly available form of Reliance Industries. So this will be their registered address. So here, whoever auditors they've appointed, so it will be the name of the audit firm details, membership number, their registered address. Yes. Okay. I'll just share my screen again. Yeah. Now is it fine? Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So coming back, so this is the ADT1 form that we were seeing. Uh, so these are the audit firm details, period for which we are appointed. So like I mentioned, so this was the first, of course, Reliance Industries being a very large listed entity, so it will form in the first auditor rotation cycle. So from 2017 to 22, they appointed these auditors. So now they will be there from 23 to 27, and now as we speak for 26, 27, this is the last year of the firms which have completed 10 years in the mandatory firm rotation cycle. So this is how your ADT1 form will look like. Appointment is within the limit, so there are certain sections of the Companies Act again which we need to comply. So ADT1 form, whenever it is being filed, so this limit section also you need to check and you need to have that in your file documented. And if that auditor is appointed previously also, then these are the details that need to be filled in. So this is how practically your ADT1 form will look like. And details of the auditor, membership number, and these are some of the attachments. So these also we'll have a look at it. Just give me a minute. I'll just reshare. I guess that does not come up on the screen. Yeah. So this is how your letter to auditors, like I mentioned, will look like. So the company is telling, so we cannot just have a verbal appointment. So the company will tell us that we are pleased to appoint this so and so firm as our auditors, and your first year of audit will be 2017. So this was the first appointment letter that they would have received. The company will pass a resolution to this effect. So the resolution passed in the general meeting, that will also be duly signed and attached. So members have approved this and you are appointed as auditor. So this is a very important document that we need to have, because tomorrow the client should not come up and tell us that I never appointed you. So we need to be very sure that our appointment documents are there in place. And this is how we will give the consent. So all the independence checks that we were looking at in the first place, so it is to ensure that we are eligible to be appointed as auditors. So herein the audit firm is replying that we are eligible for appointment as auditors, no, not disqualified. So all of the things that we saw that were discussed, so they are not disqualified under any section or any relevant provisions of the Companies Act, the Chartered Accountants Act, and the required rules and regulations. Their proposed appointment is within the sections of the Companies Act. They are not exceeding the number of clientele limits. So all of these things, the audit firm needs to reply to the management. And in order to just have this one pager document in place, we need to comply with all of those independence requirements. So that is where this stems up from, that in order to issue this letter, we need to be fully independent and compliant with all the independence rules and regulations. So herein, and they do have a matter of, say, professional misconduct in respect of partner of a firm. Of course, SRBC being such a large organization could have some matters outstanding. So that they have disclosed. So we need to be very transparent in our disclosure to the management. This they have another joint auditor, so they have also disclosed their consent to operate as auditors. So this is how it will typically look like. So till now, the documents that we have checked and seen, these sum up to our independence checks. So once all the independence checks are done, these are the final documents which will form part of your audit file. So coming back to our presentation, so we are done with our first part, that was independence. So now we'll go to briefly touch base upon the second part, that is our engagement letter. The next part, the next is whenever once you are finalized. So once you are finalized that okay, you will be that you will be acting as an independent auditor of the company. All the requirement appointment documents are there in place. You need to have an engagement letter, because without that you will just be like shooting in the blind. So some of the key matters which will govern your engagement letter will be scope clarity. That is what financial statements are being audited by us. Whether it is just under Companies Act, whether they also need us to do some limited reviews, they need us to do some special purpose assignments. Whatever be the case, we need to have those things in our engagement letter. So you'll just not go and audit the client, say some relatives partnership firm, because it is there in that, because they just ask you to. They need that thing needs to be there covered in your engagement letter, which will be formally signed. So unless and until it is not any company, any partnership firm to be covered, it is not there professionally in your engagement letter, you are not obliged to audit that. So कल को उठ के client आके हमें नहीं बोल सकता है कि आपने इसका audit क्यों नहीं किया. You can just give them back the engagement letter which they have also signed कि ये तो हमारे scope में covered ही नहीं है. Audit period. So for what period you are auditing? Is it for the year ended March 31, 25, 26? Any interim period that you need to audit? Any limited reviews that you need to perform? Because if the period is not written, then the client will expect from us that you certify the numbers from the day your initial letters were signed up to next Diwali. हम बैठ के audit ही करते रहेंगे, which cannot be the case. We need to have a fixed audit period defined in our engagement letter. A regulatory compliance. So under what will we report? Will it be under Companies Act, CARO, SEBI, LODR, income tax, whatever it is? So the engagement letter will only save us when the client suddenly comes up to us and says that you have got to deliver along with the statutory financial statements these 30 certificates in a matter of 2 days. So again, you can go back to your engagement letter and tell the client that it is not there in the scope. I will not be able to deliver that. But in order to have that, a written, formalized and signed engagement letter is very important, because at the start सब अच्छा लगता है. Okay, I have confirmed to you, you have confirmed to me. It can be a verbal agreement, but when the things get murky, that is when your documents will come to save you. So management responsibilities. So this will essentially help us differentiate from the client कि तुम्हारा काम क्या है और हमारा काम क्या है. Otherwise, the management may assume that whatever work is there, 100% that is our responsibility only. We need to categorically bring out in the engagement letter that the management and management only is responsible for preparation of the financial statements that give a true and fair view in accordance with auditing standards. Auditor can give the opinion, not the trial balance. Trial balance is 100%, trial balance and financial statements 100% responsibility of management. Internal controls, it is their responsibility to design, implement, and maintain adequate internal controls. Of fraud prevention and detection. So it is again the primarily responsibility of the management of the company to identify any frauds. We are auditors. We cannot play the role of CID. So we cannot, like, we'll be able to look at certain misstatements which form part of our audit, but the primary responsibility still lies with the management. Reasonable assurance, not magical, not 100% assurance. Oh, as part of audit, we cannot ever guarantee 100% assurance to the client because auditor will express an opinion on whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement. But because, like we'll be covering in the subsequent slides, we do sampling, we apply judgments, and there are certain inherent limitations to audit. We cannot guarantee that we'll be able to detect all misstatements. So it is our job to provide reasonable assurance. We cannot say that you personally checked each and every voucher and soul in this company's assurance. So that is not possible. It will always be a reasonable assurance. Uh, Again, fees, like we discussed earlier, also fees is very important. It could hamper your independence. It could hamper if you're too dependent, if the fees are contingent, any such things coming in. So you need to have the fee structure in place. You need to have the billing schedule that, okay, once I present my bill, you will pay it within, say, normal 30 days, 60 days. It cannot be the bill is due after 2 years. What are the reporting expectations? Again, that will come in from your scope clarity. So again, audit, like I mentioned, engagement letter needs to be drafted, needs to be there on pen and paper, signed by the relevant authority who is approved by the company, maybe their board of directors, audit committee chair, anybody, to sign the engagement letter and have it in our file. So we'll just have a look at a sample engagement letter. So this is how your typical engagement letter will look like: the date, the client name, address, whatever are the details of the address. Uh, so it will be addressed to the client representative, board of directors, audit committee. The period will be specified here, March 25, 26, whatever client name. This will be a typical statutory audit engagement letter. So it will look in like this: that what are the objectives of audit, say balance sheet as at March 31, 26, statement of profit and loss, cash flow. If it is under Ind AS, then statement of changes in equity. Under IGAP or under Ind AS, our audit will be conducted in accordance with the standards of auditing. Then internal financial controls, if it is applicable to the client, we'll of course go into detail as to how do we audit internal financial controls, then give a brief of that. Management responsibility. So this is the main thing: financial statements and their preparation, presentation, fair presentation is the responsibility of the company's management. We as auditors are not responsible for financial statements. Our job is only and only to audit those. तो मैनेजमेंट शुड नेवर एवर एक्सपेक्ट फ्रॉम अस कि हमने तो बस खाली टीबी दे दिया, फाइनेंशियल्स भी आप बनाओ एंड ऑडिट भी आप करो. नहीं होगा. It has to be clearly brought out in the engagement letter, and we as independent auditors need to ensure that we adhere to that as well. Auditor's responsibility also, we need to again spell out that we'll conduct our audit in accordance with the standards of auditing. Our audit procedures will include, so this is typically what all we'll also cover in our session. And again, we need to have this in place that because of inherent limitations of audit, human error, management override, we'll be able to provide a reasonable assurance. Interim audit, quarterly review, if the management expects us to do that, needs to be brought out in the scope. Limitations of our audit, again, remember that we are not bloodhounds. We cannot detect each and everything that goes wrong in the client. Other information management responsibilities in detail. So it can be tailored to, it can be like, you can have it agreed according to whatever templates. ICA also has some broad templates. We can tailor it according to our requirements as to what all things are applicable on the client. But these are some of the fixed parameters which you need to have in the engagement letter. Again, fees and billing arrangements. So what will be your fees for the client? What will be the timing of the field work? So how much clarity you have in your engagement letter, it will save you later on, whenever, if in case if any dispute arises, in case if anything goes wrong, this will be your first saving grace. That is our engagement letter. Hmm. So do we want to take some questions yet? Okay, maybe we can like take another topic and then we can go on to another set of questions. So coming to our second phase of this of understanding. So second phase will be business understanding. Again, very paramount before we start our audit. So if you have not understood the business, you have not understood as to what industry your client operates in, what are its specific risks, what checks and balances you are supposed to have while auditing that industry. Trust me, you will not be able to become a good auditor. So it is very important that we have a thorough business understanding of the client that we are supposed to audit. So what will typically form part of our business understanding? So it will depend on a lot on the client that you are allocated. So when you start your articleship journey, it will depend a lot as to what sort of client you are allocated. Say 100 crore local manufacturing company, it is like your friend's bakery. You know the ingredients and the receipts also. So it will be a easy flowing thing. You will be able to have control over over all the areas. But a 10,000 crore diversified conglomerate company operating say in 20 states of India. Nobody, even the client CF also would not know, okay, यहाँ पे मेरा warehouse है, यहाँ पे मेरी factory है. They may also need to go back. So how we as auditors will be able to know? So it will depend a lot on the size and structure of the entity that you are operating in. Then entity complexity also, if it is 100 crore turnover, fine, it is manageable. You'll also know, like you'll personally know the CEO and the CFO. 500 to 2000 crore, if you have a company, there may be some concerns because it will probably have multiple locations, multiple issues. And a 10,000 plus crore, it will be total chaos. Even the CFO doesn't know all the locations. So you will need to prepare your audit plan. You will need to prepare your business understanding accordingly. So next is the structure. So if they have a centralized structure, say every accounting is done at the headquarters, all transactions are passed there, single GL, you may have a simpler life on such client. However, if it is decentralized, having multiple stores, multiple locations, the life will get difficult for us as auditors. Regulatory environment. So, what sort of regulatory environment are they operating in? Is your company a bank? Is it governed by RBI regulations? Is it an insurance company? Do the IRDA regulations come in? Is it a normal private limited company? Then the Companies Act requirements will come in. Is it a partnership firm? Then the Partnership Act requirements will come in. So we need to know what regulatory environment our company operates in. After that only we'll be able to like figure out that, okay, if it is a bank, RBI has standard formats. For a bank, you cannot audit and publish the financial statements in the Companies Act format. So that will be a clear-cut case that we have not understood our client's business. We have not understood the regulatory environment our client is operating in. So it is very important, very paramount that we know what the regulatory environment of our client is. Operations. So again, is it a single company, single location? मेरे का ऑफिस से 5 किलोमीटर दूर है कंपनी का ऑफिस, वहीं पे बाजू में प्लांट भी है, मैं वहां जाऊंगी, सब कुछ कवर हो जाएगा. Or is it spread out in 29 states of India and the neighboring countries? Then you need to have your audit plan made accordingly. So basis this we'll cover in the next slide as to what factors will form part of our risk assessments for the type of industry that we are auditing. What could be the probable fraud risk factors which could arise out of those? Even your estimate. So for what sort of client I'm auditing, what could be my probable estimate? कहाँ कहाँ होगा जहाँ पे मैनेजमेंट ने अपने कॉल लिए हुए होंगे, वो मुझे ज्यादा देखना पड़ेगा. Rather than just having एक बिल आया, उसको नॉर्मल एक अकाउंटेंट ने प्रोसेस किया, एंट्री कर दी, दैट इज फाइन. But if say my company is operating on a very large scale, there are many transactions and derivatives, valuations are ongoing, there are business and mergers, there are takeovers happening. All of these will have management judgments. All of these will have their own regulatory requirements. So all of those also I'm required to know, I'm required to understand. Post and that only I can start my audit. Client को समझे बिना applying the same template what you have on one client to another client, trust me, that is a recipe for disaster. So we discussed about the size for the client, structure, geography, centralized, decentralized, regulatory requirements, industry characteristics. So coming to this, so what requirements in an audit plan your manufacturing industry will have? Say therein you need to check your inventory, therein you need to check your revenue, you need to check your revenue from sale of goods, you need to check the purchase of goods. Same thing, you cannot go on a service client and say कि मेरे को GRN दिखाओ, मेरे को goods receipt note दिखाओ, मेरे को इन्वेंट्री देखना है. वो बोलेगा हमारे पास तो इन्वेंट्री है ही नहीं, बिकॉज वी आर अ सर्विस क्लाइंट. सिमिलरली फॉर बैंक क्लाइंट पे जाके आप नहीं बोल सकते कि मेरे को मशीनरी दिखाओ, वो बोलेंगे हमारे एम्प्लॉयज है, हमारी मशीनरी है. So that way you have to be very clear with the industry characteristics your client is operating in. Again, who are the board members? What board committees do they have? What is your top management? Who are the mandatory authorities for signing of those financial statements? So again, you will need to have all of those checks and balances in place. Understand that what sort of a board structure the client has. Say like if it is falling in the first category of a 10,000 crore turnover company, and the board has just two members, and though has two members, no professionals on the board, that will ask us to like keep up our risk antennas, because just two board members managing a 10,000 crore company seems unusual. We'll have to like put in extra time and efforts over their understanding of their structure, understanding of their controls. But say if they have audit committees, if they have board committees, if they have independent directors on board, that will give auditors a greater assurance that okay, there are checks and balances which the management also has put into picture. Ind AS or IGAP applicability. So for every assignment, even continuing or a new assignment that you take in, you should not blindly rely on what the previous auditor has done. क्योंकि पहले भी यही एक्ट एप्लीकेबल था, पहले भी हम फाइनेंशियल्स अकाउंटिंग स्टैंडर्ड्स के अंडर ही बनाते थे, पहले भी यही एक्ट्स एप्लीकेबल थे, अभी भी यही होगा. नहीं, we are living in an extremely dynamic regulatory scenario wherein every day new amendments are coming in, new things are being introduced. The Companies Act also undergoes continuous changes as to कि आज ये लिमिट है, कल ये लिमिट थोड़ा नीचे आ गया, फिर वो लिमिट थोड़ा ऊपर हो गया, डिपेंडिंग on the overall national regulatory scenario. So we need to have those checks and balances in place every time we audit. So just remember this, that understanding of the entity is not a one-time exercise. That document which you have, we'll also see the document in the next slide. that documentation should be a living document and should be updated throughout the audit as and when you gain new insights and information. So आज आपको पता है सिर्फ एक सिंगल कंपनी है, सिंगल लोकेशन पे है. During your audit only, what if the company goes and acquires another company and makes it their subsidiaries? Your scope did not cover consolidated financial statements, but now it will have to. During your audit only, say there is a flood on one of their plants and that inventory gets destroyed. So all of these things you will need to keep on updating throughout the audit and need to like tailor your audit procedure, your audit program according to that. So these are just some of the basic points under audit documentation that we need to have when we are documenting our understanding of the entity. So first is discussion among team members. So what did your engagement partner ask you to take care of when you're auditing a banking company or auditing an insurance client? You need to have that documented. What are the key elements of understanding obtained? आपने क्लाइंट से बात किया, आपने प्रीवियस ईयर उनका जाके फाइनेंशियल रिपोर्ट पढ़ा, आपने कुछ गूगल सर्च किया, आपने कुछ इंडस्ट्री के रिपोर्ट देखे, वॉट एवर यू हैव सीन, you need to have that thing documented. Again, what are your sources of information? Those sources should be reliable. Risk assessment procedures performed. We'll get to that in the next coming slides as to what is the detailed risk assessment procedures performed. But just to give a broad view, कि like we were discussing कि अगर मेरा वो client bank है, then of course my loans going bad is a major risk that I carry. So that has to form part of my risk assessment procedures. What are the critical points in this to be remembered? So it needs to be updated annually before the audit starts. You cannot just start an audit based on your previous year understanding of the entity, and then in the middle of the audit you realize that okay, my understanding does not hold good. There have been huge changes on the client. It will create a chaotic situation. Going back to the client, and updating our understanding, doing the audit procedures again, a strict no-no. But this has to be reviewed by someone senior. Like when you are just beginning your audit journey, you cannot expect that you will be able to do a thorough through understanding of the entity. You can have that file prepared, but some senior person in your firm, in your organization needs to review that. Changes during the year, like we are mentioning, any new acquisition, change in board member, any resignations, everything needs to be documented. Whatever is your understanding that needs to be linked to the risk assessment on your file. So what are some of the best practices is that you can create a checklist based on the cumulative firm experience that we have, that okay, these are the things which should be there in our understanding of the entity in your audit file. कि ये 15-20 चीजें तो हमारी फाइल में होनी ही चाहिए. Whatever else we do, that will be an add-on. Or you cross-reference that with prior audit. You update for any changes during the audit. You include some document references that, okay, I checked from this industry report, I checked from this news article. If required, get some management representations on that. Common mistakes. So here is where your as first year articles, as new to the audit profession, you are likely to make, like we mentioned, copying prior year without updates. You do not know any update of the current year. जो last year था मैंने वही का वही किया. And this is one of the most common, even like whenever we practically review the work done by new people who come into audit, the first excuse is from where did you find this? पहले ये किया हुआ था इसलिए मैंने यहीं पे किया. No, that's a strict no. You need to have fresh eye view every year for understanding of the entity, for independence, like we're discussing every year, every day that you go into audit. Missing regulatory changes, inadequate related party mapping. Again, a very big gray area for the auditors. A client has acquired some new business. Client की subsidiary ने कोई और subsidiary को acquire कर लिया. Maybe you're not auditing that subsidiary, but still that step down subsidiary is your related party. If you have transactions with that subsidiary, is it at arm's length? So it's a continuous web which is happening, and you need to be updated with all the changes that are ongoing. Ignoring management changes, your CEO, CFO resigning in the same year. It just cannot be a coincidence. There has to be something which went wrong. Either it was wrong with them, either something is wrong with the company, something is wrong with the management. We just cannot turn a blind eye to these things or not linking it with a risk assessment. So I'll just show you a document as to how your understanding of the entity should look like. So these are just some of the samples, of course, not a very comprehensive view. It will depend on your client to client, but you should have your client profile memo in the file. What is their name, incorporation, share capital details, nature of business, key product services, major suppliers and customers. Why is this important? Say your client is dependent on only one supplier. That company is registered in Taiwan. Now कल को उठ के चाइना ने हमला कर दिया उनपे, my entire supply chain is blocked. So even like it's not that you are just sitting in one remote location of your city and auditing. All the geopolitical factors which are happening in and around will also impact us. It's not that it's no longer businesses are no longer operating in isolation. And hence we not only need to know our clients' business, we also need to know these things, who are our major customers, suppliers, what is the group organization structure, shareholding percentage, like we mentioned, list of subsidiaries, JVs, associates. मेरे क्लाइंट की सब्सिडी ने कोई और सब्सिडी एक्वायर कर दी, लाइक वी वर डिस्कसिंग. So all of these things need to be there and these needs to be updated. What is your governance structure? So your board composition, audit committee, what other committees do they have? Risk NRC, that is a risk committee, CSR committee. Who are the key managerial personnel? What is their profile? Do they have some criminal history? The management structure, authorized signatories, related parties, internal audit. Is internal audit applicable to my client? Do they have the required internal audit function? Coming second, so we are discussing regulatory framework. We covered all of these. Companies Act, listed entity, industry specific, SEBI, Electricity Act, IRDA, RBI, INDES or IGAP, tax registrations, other licensing, environmental clearances. Again, this has become very paramount that whether there are any environmental norms and factors that you need to meet, previous year compliance status, financial analysis, so comparative financial analysis, trend, your ratios, what are your profitability ratios, is the company in continuous losses, can it still be a going concern in spite of that? Your risk assessment memo, so your business risk, financial risk, operating
Can I
risk.
ask,
Yes, sir.
Madam, I will request you one thing. Like you are showing client profile memo. तो ये आप स्टूडेंट्स को ये जरूर बता दो कि ये होता ही क्या है, या गवर्नेंस स्ट्रक्चर होता ही क्या है, क्योंकि बहुत बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग बातें आप बता रहे हो, लेकिन थोड़ा सा आप स्पीड स्लो रखो ताकि क्या है कि स्टूडेंट्स उसको प्रॉपरली अंडरस्टैंड भी कर पाए, क्योंकि अभी आई एम नॉट श्योर कि स्टूडेंट्स को ये पता भी होगा. ठीक है, तो आप इसको थोड़ा सा और एक्सप्लेन करोगे ना तो अच्छा रहेगा स्टूडेंट्स के लिए. थैंक यू.
So we'll again like come back to our governance structure. So the every company is required to have some board of directors on their board. So does that company have those required board of directors? The board will be the governing authority of any company. So do they have those board members? Audit committees. So under Companies Act, certain companies are required to have audit committee. So typically an audit committee will oversee our governance structure. So does the client have those required audit committee in place? Do they have independent directors, people with some industry experience, people with some financial experience? Do they have such people on the board in their governance structure? If they have these, then that will give the auditors a heightened assurance that okay, my governance structure. So not only me, but there are some other independent individuals, not just management, not just promoters, also who are looking into the day-to-day operations of the company, who are overlooking the company. Regulatory framework, we discussed that these are your laws and regulations applicable. So we need to check as to whatever industry our client is operating in, what are the specific acts applicable to that industry, and whether all of those acts requirements are being met or not. So firstly, before the requirement, you need to have this exhaustive list that what sort of laws and regulations are applicable to your particular industry. So if we just miss out on applicability itself, then it will become very difficult for us to check that compliance. तो क्लाइंट पे इंड एस है या आई गैप है, अगर आपको वही नहीं पता है, तो हाउ विल यू इंश्योर कि आपने फाइनेंशियल इंस्ट्रूमेंट का रिपोर्टिंग सही से किया, अगर आपके क्लाइंट पे आई गैप एप्लीकेबल है तो। एंड वाइस वर्सा, अगर आपके क्लाइंट पे इंड एस एप्लीकेबल है और आप फिर भी रेवेन्यू रिकॉग्निशन अंडर AS9 कर रहे हैं rather than Ind AS 115, so this is a like this could be a big blunder that happens on audit. So we need to be very sure as to what regulations, what laws are applicable to the company. Financial analysis. So we all have seen those pie charts, those trend charts. So that is not just for share trading analysis. Even we can use that to have a detailed understanding of our clients' financial health as to whether last 3 साल में हमें क्या consistent losses हो रहे हैं, क्या हमारे profits बहुत ज्यादा fluctuate हो रहे हैं, हमारा क्या हमारा revenue up down हो रहा है, what are our लाइक हमारे डेटर्स कितने पुराने हैं, कितने टाइम में हमारे डेटर से हमें पैसा आ रहा है, प्रायर ईयर ऑडिट पीरियड में कोई क्वालिफिकेशन था या नहीं था, कोई और रिपोर्टिंग था प्रायर पीरियड ऑडिटर्स का या नहीं था. So all of these things will help us in our understanding so that we can do our risk assessment accordingly. अगर हमें पास्ट के बारे में कुछ पता ही नहीं है, unless it is a first year company, अगर हमें जो चीजें ऑलरेडी रिपोर्टेड है, जो चीजें पब्लिक डोमेन में है, अगर हमें उनके बारे में पता ही नहीं है, तो हम कैसे how will we ensure that our current year strategy, our current year audit program covers all of those? Risk assessment memo. So again, what are your business risk? आपका competition क्या है? What are the market dynamics? What is the customer concentration? What could be our typical financial risk? Like, are we facing liquidity concerns? Our creditors are not paying us on time. What are our like current ratio हमारा अच्छा है या नहीं है? Do we have a healthy working capital or not? So all of these things, maybe you may think कि ये सारी चीजें तो मैनेजमेंट का काम है, ये हम एज ऑडिटर्स क्यों देखे? But all of these things will help you determine, firstly, like on a broad level, this could have impact on your going concern. And on a micro level, it will impact as to how you design audit procedures for these. If a client has financial risk, अगर हमारे debtors हमें time पे पैसा नहीं दे रहे, I'll have to do some extra procedures on my debtor balances when I go on to audit them. मुझे उनका ज्यादा subsequent realization check करना पड़ेगा कि मेरे debtors मुझे पैसा दे रहे या नहीं दे रहे. So that is how you need to link each of these risks to your audit strategy. तो आपको पहले ये risk पता होने चाहिए. Only after that you can formulate a detailed and a comprehensive audit strategy. Climate risk. So supposing if my client has a coal power plant operating. Now, as we know, government is more and more increasing focus on renewable energy. They want to shut down those old coal plants because of pollution concerns or whatever be the case. अगर वो plant shut down हो जाता है, now this I can know only if I have done that climate risk analysis. और कहीं पे मुझे नहीं दिखेगा, मेरा प्लांट है, प्लांट चल रहा है, प्लांट में assets है, everything is fine. But do I still need to have an impairment done on that? And how will I get to know that? Only and only if I do my client and ESG risk assessment. Now, accounting policies again, what are my policies around revenue, inventory, depreciation, or whether I'm following a written down value method for depreciation, whether I'm following a straight line depreciation method, which ERP system I'm using. So a lot of your audit procedures will be designed around that. If your client has SAP, then you will also need to have some IT personnel on the on your audit team who is able to audit SAP. और यू विल नीड टू हैव दैट रिक्विजिट नॉलेज ऑफ एसएपी एनवायरनमेंट. अगर आपका क्लाइंट कोई कस्टमाइज सॉफ्टवेयर यूज कर रहा है, अगेन वो सॉफ्टवेयर कितना रिलायबल है, वो सॉफ्टवेयर में एंट्री फ्लो कैसे हो रहा है. सो एवरीथिंग, ऑल ऑफ दीज थिंग्स ऑल्सो वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड. इट्स नॉट जस्ट दैट कि हम गए ऑडिट में, हमने 10 15 20 50 वाउचर्स चेक किए और ऑडिट इज डन. नो, our understanding of the entity has to be so thorough, so robust that we are able to formulate an audit plan accordingly so that each and every area what we audit, it interlinks to that. Any significant events or changes that have been done in the management, like CFO, CEO, key management personnel, all of them resigning, new people being appointed. These are our big red flags, big like indicators as to why we should do a more thorough understanding of our client. We should deep dive more into the news, what is there in the news. Client se pucho. We'll have to do some meetings with the client to understand as to why such things are happening. Acquisition, mergers, demergers. Again, this will have a drastic impact on our audit strategy and program. So we need to know all of these. We need to document all of these. New business ventures coming in, any significant borrowings. अगर आपका client debt structuring में गया है, अगर if your client is not able to repay their borrowings, does it have a going concern impact? क्या आपको उसको क्लासिफिकेशन इम्पैक्ट पे चेंज आएगा फाइनेंशियल्स में? क्या मुझे उसको करंट क्लासिफाई करना चाहिए, नॉन करंट क्लासिफाई करना चाहिए? तो एवरीथिंग इज इंटरलिंक्ड to your understanding of the client, how well you have understood it and how well you have documented that understanding. So basis this, at the end, you will get your ultimate audit approach, your overall audit strategy, risk-based, substantive, how you want to audit, your materiality level. So you cannot determine materiality, of course, we'll cover it in detail, that my materiality levels for a client which has a debt restructuring vis-a-vis a normal simple manufacturing client, vis-a-vis a 10,000 crore conglomerate, I'll not have the same materiality parameters for all. But how do I know this? Only and only if I perform thorough understanding of my client. If you want to have any external experts involved on your engagement, on your client, on your audit, but how will you know that if you do not know that there are mergers and acquisitions taking place? आप valuation expert को कैसे लाओगे अपने client पे? So you need to know if such things are happening. Only and only basis that you will be able to pre-plan this. अगर आप साइन ऑफ के एक वीक पहले आपको पता चल रहा है कि ऐसा कुछ मर्जर और एक्विजिशन हुआ है, आपके फर्म में वो रिक्वायर्ड वैल्यूएशन एक्सपर्ट नहीं है, just 1 week before the final audit sign off, it will be total chaos. So we need to know if any such thing is there so that we can pre-plan कि हाँ मुझे ये टाइप का एक्सपर्ट्स का रिक्वायरमेंट होगा, उन्हें मुझे मेरे ऑडिट के लिए इन्वॉल्व करना है. If we know that at the planning stage, it will be a very smooth ride for us. What locations do we need to visit? Whether those locations, how spread out they are in India, whether they are outside India. So unless and until we don't know the geographical spread of our client, how will we plan that? We need to plan for travel. We need to plan local travel, hai, international travel, hai. Who, when will be covering those? So all of these things, in order to know, we need to have a thorough business understanding, a team composition. So only and only after our business understanding is clear, विल बी एबल टू नो कि मुझे क्लाइंट पे मे बी 5 आर्टिकल्स रखने हैं, 10 रखने हैं, मुझे क्लाइंट पे के लिए कितने एक्सपीरियंस पार्टनर चाहिए, मुझे क्लाइंट के लिए कितने एक्सपीरियंस मैनेजर्स चाहिए. So all of these things will like flow finally to your audit plan only and only when you have that understanding in place. So this is what we covered our phase 2, that is our understanding of our entity and its environment. So now we'll go on to the third topic. So the next topic that we'll be covering is our preliminary risk assessment and strategy. So again, a very closely linked topic to our understanding of the entity and its environment. So whatever risk assessment, so this will give us an understanding, like we say कि company का overall vibe कैसा है, or to use a more Gen Z friendly term, what aura points do you allocate to this client? So basis our understanding of the entity, we'll be able to do a risk assessment analytics, highly like whether it is a highly leveraged infra company with one big customer, or whether it is a normal manufacturing entity with small business operations. So second is management integrity, like we discussed. If they have a very strong integrity, they have transparency in the organization, timely information. Client is not showing any resistance to us. They have board members who are actually active. So just having board members, having independent directors is one thing, but we also need to ensure or check as to how active they are. कितना फ्रीक्वेंटली आप देखते हो आपके ऑडिट कमेटी का जो भी चेयरमैन होगा वो क्लाइंट पे विजिट करता है, कितना फ्रीक्वेंट उनका इन्वॉल्वमेंट है. All of these things will help us understand as to what sort of an ownership structure our company has, and whether the more transparent the ownership structure is, the more like finance background के लोग हैं, industry experts है अगर आपके board of directors में, the more like you can be relied that okay, I have a good ownership structure, so my risk assessment from that point of view is less. However, say if your organization's chart looks typically like our family WhatsApp group, then all of a sudden your risk assessment will go high. You will need to do, your related party will all of a become heightened risk, because ये तो पूरा घर की बात है. It's like they only have a sole one family which is controlling everything. So there is bound to be collusion. So your risk of control testing, your risk of related party testing will automatically go high. Then next is the fraud risk indicator. So very important for us to have this not just at the planning stage, but at every stage of our audit. What are the typical fraud risk indicators as to why would someone cheat on the client, commit a fraud? So do they have any pressure? Do they have an opportunity to commit the fraud? And are they able to rationalize that okay मैंने ये गलत किया पर मैंने ये इस reason से किया and that is why I am fine. So what could be typical pressures? If your client has very high loans, then they will need to comply with the covenant. So what typically a covenant is that, say for example, you have taken loan from SBI. So SBI will ask you that, okay, you need to have your debt equity ratio 2:1. You need to have your current ratio 1:1. अगर अब आपका current ratio 0.5 ही आ रहा है, you are bound कि आप try करेंगे कि you will have more sales, you will try to inflate your debtor so that you are able to bring your current ratio 1:1. अगर मेरा लोन का नॉन कंप्लायंस हो गया, बैंक मेरे को डिफॉल्टर लिस्ट में डाल देगा. Does the client have such risk factors? If by basis of our understanding of the entity and our preliminary risk assessment, if we identify such risk factors, we need to check those covenants, compliance of those covenants, and the जो बैक में जो नंबर्स आ रहे हैं लाइक योर करंट असेट्स या करंट लाइबिलिटीज, उन पे कितना प्रेशर हो सकता है मैनेजमेंट का इन्फ्लेट या डिफ्लेट करने का. So it's an entire chain that you need to form in order to ensure that there are no such pressures which the client is facing, and if they are facing, we as auditors are able to do sufficient steps over that. Say for example, if your client has IPO plans, of course आप IPO में जाएंगे, आप ये तो नहीं बताओगे कि आपका बैलेंस शीट लॉस में है, आपका कंपनी लॉस कर रहा है. So there will be automatically a management का ट्राई होगा कि वो प्रॉफिट्स दिखाए, अच्छे रेवेन्यूज दिखाए, अच्छे मार्जिन्स दिखाए, so that their company can list at a premium. If it is the case, it automatically again becomes a heightened risk factor for us कि हम उनका रेवेन्यू, उनके प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी देखें कि are those actual sales, are those actual profits, या कुछ डमी एंट्रीज बुक हो रही है. बोनस टारगेट्स, वेरी टिपिकल एग्जांपल, अगर आपका मैनेजमेंट का बोनस टारगेट ही लिंक्ड है उनके उनके प्रॉफिट से कि इफ माय प्रॉफिट इज अबाउट से 100 crores, मेरे को इतना बोनस मिलेगा, इफ इट इज अबाउट 200 crores, मेरे को इतना बोनस मिलेगा, and that person itself is the finance head. Very tricky situation. We'll need to check each and every entry, each and everything that that person is approving, because उसका खुद का ही outflow वो financial number से linked है. Are there any prior issues with have there been any prior issues noted on these lines? Fear of losing control, supposing there is some hostile takeover which is happening, तो client कुछ manipulate करने का try कर सकता है. So all of these things we need to evaluate, putting ourselves into their shoes. कि अगर मैं क्लाइंट की जगह पे होते, हम अगर क्लाइंट की जगह पे होते, हम और क्या गलत कर सकते थे यहाँ पे, हमारे पास उसका क्या इंसेंटिव था, हमारे पास उसका क्या प्रेशर था, या हमारे पास उसकी क्या अपॉर्चुनिटी थी. नाउ अपॉर्चुनिटी, वीक कंट्रोल्स, कोई देखने वाला ही नहीं है, जो आ रहा है, जो जो वाउचर आ रहा है उसकी एंट्री हो रही है, नहीं हो रही है तो भी वाउचर या 10 15 20 वाउचर्स ड्रॉर में पड़े हुए हैं, किसी को पड़ी नहीं है एंट्रीज करने की. इफ देर इज सच अ कंट्रोल एनवायरमेंट, वेरी हाई यू आर गिविंग दैट पोरस अपॉर्चुनिटी कि हाँ यहाँ पे कोई भी फ्रॉड कर सकता है. सेग्रीगेशन ऑफ ड्यूटीज नहीं है, दैट ओनली वन पर्सन इज अप्रूविंग द इज पासिंग द एंट्री एंड अप्रूविंग द एंट्री ऑल्सो, कि हाँ ये बिल पास मैंने ये बिल की एंट्री की, मैंने ही वो एंट्री अप्रूव भी करी जाके एसएपी में. कोई दूसरा बंदा देखने वाला है ही नहीं. अगेन वेरी, this may seem very small and trivial, but this is from where the down the level your fraud risk starts. Because if your basic entries, if your basic numbers पे ही hygiene issues है, तो फिर it's like you will have to go in, it's like nothing is correct. फिर आप वो लेंस से देखना चालू करोगे कि मैं 100% ऑडिट करूँ, I'll have a very great sample size, जो हमें सैंपल्स चेक करने हैं. अगर आपको ऐसे, if your client has such opportunities to commit fraud, सब कुछ मैन्युअली हो रहा है, कुछ सिस्टम पे नहीं है, एनी सच थिंग्स, वेरी वीक कंट्रोल्स, so these are all very big red flags which you identify on your client. And if such things are happening, your risk control, your risk assessment will go significantly high up, and your audit strategy will have to drastically change according to that. And what is the rationalization? So what typically when we interact with the client, when we interact with the management, so what rationalization do we see that they give? कि यहाँ तो सब लोग थोड़ा एडजस्टमेंट कर लेते हैं, सब चलता है, ये क्वार्टर थोड़ा वीक है इसलिए हमने ऐसा किया, अगले क्वार्टर में फिक्स कर देंगे. If this is what the persistent tone of the management is, we need to, that's a big red flag for us. We need to have very heightened risk assessment in that case. Estimate risk area. So, like what sort of, again, linking it back to our understanding of the entity. So, what sort of entity the client is operating in? If their revenue model itself is very complex, they have business combinations, रोज के रोज मर्जर्स, टेक ओवर, सब कुछ अगर आपके क्लाइंट पे हो रहा है, तो जो मैनेजमेंट के एस्टिमेट है, एस्टिमेट करने के एरिया है, वेर इन दे कैन मैनिपुलेट, दे बिकम वेरी हाई. एंड इफ सच इज द केस, we need to, like we discussed earlier, we need to have those competent people on our engagement, on our file, who are able to like help us with this. So we need to link it to our preliminary risk assessment. And the next is your client meeting. So once you meet the client, and if, like I mentioned, if the tone is कि हाँ अभी थोड़ा एडजस्टमेंट है करने का, फिनेंशियल्स अभी ये क्वार्टर थोड़ा सा डाउन है, थोड़ा एडजस्टमेंट कर लेते हैं, हम नेक्स्ट क्वार्टर सही कर देंगे इसको, ईयर एंड पे सही कर देंगे. So if such are the tone, if such is the like what your client is saying such things, then again a very big risk that we are carrying into, and we'll have to we'll have to check what our risk assessment is and how do we want to design our audit procedures. Next is, this is where your coming to the next session, this is where your intelligence gathering will come into place. So whatever we have like gathered up to now, say with your initial meeting with the management, your entity overview, आपने जो financials को study किया, आपने जो management के changes को study किया, आपने जो पूरा understand entity and its environment, the entire document जो आपने बनाया, whatever previous auditor report, financial statements we read. So basis all of that, we need to have it documented in our file that why, because of these reasons, ये area में हमें risk assessment ज़्यादा लग रहा है, and because of these reasons, these areas can be given a lower risk rating. Again, very important thing is minutes of the meetings. So what typically this, you can treat this as your gold mine. So आपको और जितना information और कहीं से नहीं पता चलेगा, उतना आपको just by reading of the minutes से पता चलेगा. Now what typically minutes of meetings are, so whatever, so there will always be a company secretary or someone from the secretarial department. Whenever any meetings of the client are happening, be it board meeting, audit committee meeting, CSR meeting, they will take minutes of those, and they need to have that documented as per the Companies Act ka requirement. So whatever discussions are happening within the management, maybe that thing has not yet come into place. If the management has discussed that okay, there is a plant at a remote location which we need to close, or there is this probable company which we may acquire, there are these 100-200 employees who may decide to retrench, जिनको हम VRS देके शायद निकाल सकते हैं. This is a new technology which will bring it in our company. All of these things maybe nobody will give you in writing. Maybe these may not come up as part of your reading by reading of the prior financial statements or anything, because these are internal company privy information. But when you read the board minutes, when you read the meetings of the board of directors, you will get to know that okay, these things, maybe some of these could have happened, some of these will happen in future. So they will give you a heads up as to what do you expect on that audit, what do you expect from the management on that audit, what more risk factors could come into that audit. So again, reiterating, reading of the minutes of meetings is very, very important, whatever minutes take place during the year. Some of them could be trivial matters like approving the prior minutes, taking a roll call, to a very large important matter like a business probable acquisition, probable shutting down. So you need to be very careful when you read the minutes and not just read them. Have actionable points on them. Okay, अगर मेरा company, if my company is planning to bring in a VRS scheme, planning to retrench employees, what implications will that have on my audit? I'll have to have a higher risk assessment for my payroll area, because मुझे वो भी एक additional computation करना है. So read the minutes and link it to what actual factors you need to do to whichever audit area those minutes apply to. Again, so whenever you have an initial client meeting, these will be some of the questions that we'll have that we'll have for the client, like the entity overview. Are there any changes from the prior year? Any unusual entries, any unusual JVs that have been passed during the year? Any unusual items that the management itself may have identified, they can tell you. So having this meeting just 2 weeks before the audit completion will not have. We need to have this during our planning phase. After we have obtained an understanding of the entity, we need to go to the management, meet them, understand from them what is their point of view. It's not that every time management will try to hide. There are many companies which will be very transparent with you. They will come upfront and tell you that okay, these are the changes from the prior year, or maybe these are the unusual items. This is a new regulatory requirement that has come in. We have updated our IT systems. What are the fraud risk queries that you need to ask? ऐसा मतलब, it's not that we cannot go and ask the client. This is a very preliminary ask which we should ask the client whether they have identified any fraud risk, because linking it back to our engagement letter, so it is the preliminary responsibility of the management to identify. So during every audit, we are supposed to ask them if they have identified any fraud risk. So this is just a broad some questions that we have listed down as to what could form part of your risk inquiry document. So you will ask the question if they have a formal fraud risk assessment. To what extent is the management compensation tied to achieving specific financial targets? If it is so, like say for example, if my revenue crosses a certain threshold, you need to be very careful with the year-end revenue. अगर उनको ऐसा थ्रेशोल्ड है कि मेरे को एक साल में 100 करोड़ का रेवेन्यू करना है, अब मार्च तक में अगर 80 करोड़ ही हो रहा है, there is a very high probability they will try to push the April sales in the month of March so that their revenue target is achieved and their compensation which is linked to it, they get that. How does the management communicate to employees regarding ethical behavior and fraud consequences? Whether they have, whether the employees, like whoever employees are onboarded on that particular client, कि उनको ये सब चीजें बताई जाती है कि हमारे कंपनी की एथिक्स है, हमारे कंपनी की ये पॉलिसीज है, क्लाइंट का खुद का क्या प्रोसीजर है, हमारा जो मैनेजमेंट है उनका क्या प्रोसीजर है टू डिटरमाइन typical management override of internal controls. If they have an internal audit function, who do they report to? Have they identified any fraud during the year? A related party transaction. So according to the management, what are the significant related party transactions? How are they authorized and reviewed? अगर हमारे पहला साल है तो we'll ask the client whether there were any fraud risk related findings in the prior year audits. What areas require the most judgment or estimate? That as a management, शायद रोज के जो रेवेन्यू के इनवॉइसेस रिकॉर्ड होते हैं उसमें आपका कोई जजमेंट नहीं होगा, बट अगर वन टाइम डेटर्स का प्रोविजनिंग होगा उसमें आपका जजमेंट इन्वॉल्व होगा. तो वैसे कौन से एरियाज है इन विच यू आर डूइंग दिस अ लॉट? Any significant changes, again reiterating in operations, business model, key financial personnel, ethics hotline. So every company now is mandated to have an ethics helpline. Like एक कोई number होगा central, एक कोई email होगा, उस पे if any employee feels any concerns, they can report it. But like we need to ask the client whether they first of all have that in place. If they have that in place, what are the nature of complaints received? Now you go and check that log और आपको उसमें दिखता है 50 fraud की complaints आई हुई है. A big a big indicator to us that something wrong is happening. What are the adjustments or reversals कुछ उन्होंने अपने estimates में किए हुए? Any complex accounting treatments that they have done? They have brought in a complex financial instrument, embedded derivative, any such thing. So these, like the list is endless, but these are broad questions which you can ask the client as part of your risk inquiries. Coming next to our internal control environment assessment. So this again, along with understanding of the entity, we need to have an internal control environment assessment on our file. So the first and foremost, which forms part of this, is tone at the top. So to literally explain what is the driving force of the company, what are the values of the company. Maybe this you will not find tangibly, you will have to understand this. जब आप वहाँ क्लाइंट पे जाएंगे, आप वो लोगों से इंटरेक्ट करेंगे, व्हाट आर द टिपिकल वैल्यूज, वो ज्यादा उस हिसाब में जा रहे हैं कि चलो इसको थोड़ा एडजस्ट कर लेते हैं, इसको थोड़ा चेंज कर देते हैं, और देर अपफ्रंट इन टेलिंग यू दैट ओके हमने ये चीजें करी है, ये चीज मे बी हमसे मिस हो गई है. आर दे अपफ्रंट इन एडमिटिंग दैट, और डू दे हैव सर्टन, और सब चलता है यहाँ पे, ऐसे ही होता है, वैसा वाइब है. सो बेसिस दैट यू विल आइडेंटिफाई व्हाट इज द टोन एट द टॉप. What values does the management actually have? Like, are they actually planning to run the company in a very ethical manner, or again they are into something, some transactions which may look fishy? A code of conduct, whistleblower mechanism, what we discussed earlier. So all of these things we need to have in our audit file. We need to evaluate this, and we need to have this in our audit file in order to assess what is the control environment and what is the tone at the top. Then coming to risk assessment procedures. So how does an entity typically identify and manage it? The entire list of risks that we saw, say financial risk, operational risk. So how does that entity manage it? Information system, system integrity. If you have SAP, but SAP में आपने सिर्फ 2 ही login ID लेके रखे हुए हैं. So only one person will enter to pass the entry, one, and that same person will approve the entry. No use are those controls. Whether you have segregation of duties, maker checker, very very important, maker checker relationship, that no entry, no hit in my financial statements can be done by a single person. If one person is passing the entry, there has to be another independent person who is approving that. Then and then only you can say that your controls are operating and the entity has a good and a robust control mechanism. एक्सेस कंट्रोल. सो कैन एनीवन, आज मैंने एसएपी में एंट्री तो कर दिया मेकर चेकर से, बट क्या कोई तीसरा बंदा जाके उसको कभी भी चेंज कर सकता है? डू दे हैव सच अ लार्ज एक्सेस? इफ यस, देन अगेन माय कंट्रोल्स विल फेल. सो दीज चेक्स आई नीड टू हैव बिफोर. लाइक मैंने 50 कंट्रोल टेस्टिंग के सैंपल्स देख लिए, उसके बाद देन आई रियलाइज that okay, anybody can go and edit those even after I have checked. Those controls are of no use. Internal audit function, prior year audit issues. So all of these will form a basic matrix of your internal control environment assessment. Reading and reviewing prior documentation. We already covered some of these in our prior slides. So what were the typical audit adjustments in the prior year comparatives? Then what were the typical related party transactions, any auditor changes, any comments of previous auditors, annual reports, your management discussion and analysis, what are the other form filings done by the company. So before you start your current year, unless and until it is a first year audit client, you need to be thoroughly reading your prior year ka audit. If you have done it, then go through your own form ka audit documentation. And if it is a first year client, then go through the previous auditors report, previous auditors, any communication that they have done, so that we don't miss any risk which had already been identified. हमें इस साल का तो risk identify करना ही है, but if something that had already been flagged earlier, something that had already come up earlier. That thing we should not be missing. Mm. ESG and climate risk assessment. So we'll just briefly touch base upon this is an entire separate topic and a line in itself. So why this has become very important is because of the growing concerns, environmental concerns, climate concerns. So everyone is becoming more and more aware of this. The government is bringing out more and more reporting requirements, more and more stringent pollution requirements. So if your client is falling under any of these is into business. So again, linking it back to our business understanding. So if our client is into any such business which has an impact on the environment, like आप अगर आपके client का coal power station है, if you're into mining, if like you are constructing certain assets by destroying forest land, all of these could have huge implications on like all of these could have huge climate implications. I'm not saying that we are doing anything wrong, बट डू दे हैव अ क्लाइमेट रिस्क इम्पैक्ट इफ सो लाइक सपोजिंग अगर आप फॉरेस्ट की लैंड को डिस्ट्रॉय करके अगर आपका प्लांट वो एरिया में बन रहा है देन मे बी द गवर्नमेंट विल इम्पोज अ कंडीशन दैट ओके यू नीड टू प्लांट सो मेनी ट्रीज डू यू हैव अ प्रोविजन टू डू दैट because as an so that will directly link to your financials also. Like for example coal power plant, अगर गवर्नमेंट का डायरेक्टिव है कि आपको इसको 2 साल में बंद करना है, do you have an alternative source of power or do you need to impair? So that is how both of your climate risk and your financial statement risk are no longer separate. It's like no longer सिर्फ हम global warming की बातें करते थे. Now it has become very real. Now it has become very like on the field. Each and every like climate risk is impacting each and every business. And if the more diversified your company that you're auditing is more diversified, it has multiple lines of business, this will more likely than not hit your business. So we need to have a thorough understanding of that and whatever impact it may have on our financials, impairment testing, we need to fair value something, then discount rate what we use for climate risk scenarios. And again, SEBI, that is the capital market regulatory body. So for listed entities as well, they have made compulsory the ESG disclosures and regulatory compliance. We'll not go into details into that, but just to be aware of that climate risk is no longer isolated, no longer thing for some things for just the European and the American companies to look at. It has become very real and it has come very much on the ground. So coming to the third phase, that is our planning and our risk assessment. So team planning, we are coming to our next stage. So just think of typical how you are, say if you're the coach of a cricket team. So you will not send the 10 batsmen to play, nor will you send 10 bowlers to play. So you need to have an ideal mix कि आपके पास opening batsman हो, middle order batsman हो, spinner हो, आपके पास fast bowler हो, आपके पास wicket keeper हो. Similarly, you need to design your audit team as well. कि आपके पास में required लोग है. So typically it will be like there will be a one key audit partner, the person who will have the entire like the ultimate responsibility falls on him or her. That person will be signing the financial statements, or you will have an engagement manager, someone who will orchestrate and run the show, who will be concerned with all of the planning, on field execution. You will have your team seniors who have some amount of audit experience, and you will have your juniors and articles who are new to the client, who are learning audit. So typically, this is how your any audit team will look like. Uh, Again, like we discussed earlier, based on our understanding of the entity, we need to conclude whether we need any specialist requirement or not. Or like if your company is operating into SAP, more often than not, you will need some IT specialist on that client. If your company has, say, impairment, like we discussed on the earlier slide, impairment indicators, any going concern assessment, whether we need to have valuation experts on the client, taxation experts, if your client has many litigations, transfer pricing litigations, DT, IDT, any such things, do we need to have your tax experts on the client? So all of these things we need to figure out and have that plan in place at the initial stage itself, rather than just scrambling and looking out for experts towards the end of the audit. It will get very messy. Again, based on our understanding, this ratio, this is not sacrosanct, so this will change. So if it is a high risk area, like we're discussing in our preliminary risk assessment, if your fraud risk angle is higher, you will have more senior team members in your on your engagement. You will have a higher percentage of time being devoted by managers and partners. However, if it is a comparatively low profile client, low risk client, maybe your more time and efforts will be spent in by the juniors and the article trainees on that client. So based on the risk assessment, this percentage and involvement will change. But how do we know we have this properly? Only and only if we have done our risk assessment, only and only if we have done our client understanding properly. So this is how your typical audit team structure will look like. So you have your engagement partner, you have your engagement manager. Below him, there are him or her, there are three audit seniors. Each one has one junior team member or one article allocated. And so it will be like they'll all be reporting to their immediate senior. So the article trainees will report to their senior audit team members. They will report to the engagement manager. Engagement manager, say maybe weekly or fortnightly, will brief to the engagement partner as to what is the status, any findings that they have, any new things that they discovered on the audit. So this is how a typical it will go, like it is a bottom-up approach. So the senior auditor 1, 2, 3, and the junior 1, 2, article 1, 2, these will be the people who will be there on the field day to day, and you will more likely than not be falling in this category. So you will be the eyes and the ears of your audit firm on the field. Whatever you observe, whatever you see, whatever you report, your ultimate engagement partner will sign the audit opinion based on your findings. So never ever like devalue your work. Your work is the most important one on the job, because it is you that will be dealing with the management day to day. It will be you who will be like checking the vouchers, checking the supporting evidences day to day. So if it will only and only be on the basis of your work performed that your ultimate engagement partner will be able to sign a correct audit opinion. So these are just some of the broad-based roles that we have. So maybe your engagement partner will not be involved in your day-to-day, say, vouching activities or checking of transaction activities. Their role will limit more of to say discussions around fraud risk, discussion around audit strategy, discussion around whatever new happenings, new regulatory frameworks coming in. So your partners will mainly be focused on that. Your managers will be like your link between the partner and the junior team members. So they'll need to be involved for the partner level, high level discussions, as well as any day-to-day challenges that come into picture. So they will be playing a dual role, say, of coordinating with the partners and coordinating with the junior team members as well. And like we discussed, whoever like your junior team members, article trainees, they'll be involved in the evidence gathering activity, documentation, testing procedures. The higher level will more of be involved from a strategic point of view and taking final calls on the engagement, and the junior team members will more of be on the client, gathering evidence and having things in place so that the senior team members can take a call, can report on the financial statements. Hmm. Next is discussing for the team continuity. So, like we linking it back to the mandatory firm requirement that we discussed. So, it is very essential to have team continuity, but just having the same team members doing the same work, say for 4, 5, 7 years, that will again hamper our independence. So those checks will go down. They will wear comfort glasses that okay, this is something which I've been doing for past 5 years, 10 years. यहाँ तो सब सही होगा. So this is a very tricky thing to decide as to you have the team continuity, but you do not have the same members auditing the same things year after year after year. So what we can plan is that there is a cyclical rotation, as in say for one area, three people are auditing, then we can have at least one team member new introduced to the firm and to that area, and one team member rotated out, so that in a cyclical manner, the team continuity continues, the audit is not hampered, and along with that we have fresh eyes coming in so that they can see those things, they can audit those things from a fresh eye perspective. Trainings again very important part of our audit curriculum. Even it's not just mandatory training or not just mandatory course that we have as CS that we have as chartered accountants. Trainings we need to have periodic trainings for the new team members and also for the existing team members, because we are living in a very dynamic scenario, dynamic audit world, wherein there are new standards, new things coming up each and every day. So unless our team members are trained for the new amendments, new regulations coming up, new technology coming up, we'll not be able to do an efficient audit.
Yes,
Audit budget.
can ask.
Yes, yes, sir.
Can we take queries now,
Yeah, sure.
or you want to uh, complete this
I'll just
particular?
quickly complete in 2 minutes
Yes,
the
why
slide,
not?
and then we can go. Yeah.
Sure,
So
sure.
just to sum up the audit budgeting, so you need to have that plan in place. You need to have your audit budgets in place. And again, your audit plan and your audit budgets will link back to your preliminary risk assessment, to your understanding of the entity, so that the high risk areas get more budget. You use appropriate technologies on your client, and also the same is communicated to the client, so that in case there are any changes which are happening, you are able to negotiate for fees, you are able to negotiate for time accordingly. So having a robust budget tied up to your risk assessment, tied up to your understanding of the entity is very important, so that the next step, that is the audit execution, becomes smoother for us. Now we can stop the session here and we can take up questions.
Yes. Yes. Can I ask two queries are there? Simran is asking that while obtaining an understanding about the business structure and background of the client, does an auditor rely only on the information and accounts provided by the management, or he needs to do more research on his own before accepting the audit?
So not just on the documents provided by the client, we also need to have some independent research being done, maybe on the industry, maybe on the promoters, maybe on the management of the company, directors. What are the operations of the company? Doing our own analysis is very important, because ultimately it is us who is accepting the audit. So if anything goes right or wrong, it is our responsibility. We just cannot say that we relied on so and so report or so and so document. So it is very important that we do our independence checks and balances in place, have a thorough documentation of that, and then conclude whether why we are accepting or not accepting.
Great, great, great. So Simran, I think you would have got the answer. Another student, Balchandra, is asking, is there a possibility that minute of the meeting, be it board meeting or any other meeting, itself is manipulated while assessing the high risk area?
So manipulation risk will exist throughout the audit, like any document, including minutes, can be manipulated. But that is why we discuss that we need to be very careful with the tone at the top that we discuss, and what is the intention of the management. We need to be very thorough with our fraud risk assessment. So if therein the triggers itself are high, then any document that we receive from the client, we'll have to evaluate it from a fraud risk angle. So
Right.
manipulate होने को तो any document can be manipulated, and that is why we need to have a very thorough understanding of the management and the management intentions and our fraud risk assessment.
Or moreover, I think professional skepticism,
Yes.
auditor's questioning mind, that will also help in this. जो आपका question है student बालचंद्र, that minutes of the meeting, तो आप अपनी professional skepticism स्टार्टिंग से लेकर और एंड तक, हम कहते हैं आपका क्वेश्चनिंग माइंड, आप क्वेश्चन करिए। अगर आपके माइंड में आ रहा है कि ये मिनट बुक मैनिपुलेट हो गई है या कुछ है, तो आप उसकी डीप मैडम ये कहना चाह रही कि आप उसकी रिसर्च मोड में जाओ, फिर आप उसका एक एनालिसिस बनाओ, आप देखो कि हमारे पास कोई अल्टरनेटिव डॉक्यूमेंट हम ले सकते हैं क्या, आप एडिशनल ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स इंप्लॉय कर सकते हैं क्या। अगर मुझे कोई भी डाउट है तो आप उसके अल्टरनेटिव डॉक्यूमेंट्स जो कि आपको ज्यादा रिलायबिलिटी दे, तो वो एविडेंस आप लेकर उसको लेके तब आप अपनी सेटिस्फेक्शन कंप्लीट करो, है ना। और आपको कोई भी अगर ऑडिट के दौरान स्टूडेंट्स आपको किसी डॉक्यूमेंट पर ये लगता है कि ये मुझे सही नहीं लग रहा, ये तो मुझे मैनिपुलेटेड लग रहा है, ये तो फेक लग रहा है, तो आप अल्टरनेटिव डॉक्यूमेंट लो। और सेकेंडली आप मैनेजमेंट से रिप्रेजेंटेशन भी ले सकते हो कि ये मैनेजमेंट की रिप्रेजेंटेशन ले सकते हो आप। अगर उसमें बैंकर बैंकर अगर उस रोल में अगर साथ में है तो बैंक से सर्टिफिकेट बनवा सकते हो उस पर्टिकुलर डॉक्यूमेंट के लिए। या आप एक फॉर एग्जाम्पल आपको मशीनरी के उस पर कोई डाउट हो रहा है तो आप एक इंडिपेंडेंट इंजीनियर की रिपोर्ट ले सकते हो, आप किसी चार्टर्ड इंजीनियर जो होते हैं उनकी रिपोर्ट ले सकते हो। आप अगर कंपनी से रिलेटेड कोई काम तो कंपनी सेक्रेटरी की आप सर्टिफाई करा सकते हो डॉक्यूमेंट को। मतलब आपको अल्टरनेटिव सोचना है। तो कनाज मैडम आप इसे एलेबोरेट करो थोड़ा और कि मैं ठीक कह रहा हूं या नहीं कह रहा।
Of course, sir. And also, like, if we are not able to rely on the internal documents, then we can also check, like, sir told from bank confirmation. Like, अगर आपको sales के invoice पर doubt लग रहा है, तो आप directly debtors को पूछो। अगर आपको कोई मतलब कोई बैंक स्टेटमेंट पर डाउट लग रहा है, तो बैंक से सर्टिफाइड कॉपी लेके आओ। So similar way, like these are not day-to-day scenarios, these are extreme cases. But in case if we encounter such things, then we need to have more of external evidences on our file rather than internal ones. अगर हमें क्लाइंट पे लग रहा है कि वो फॉर्ज डॉक्यूमेंट्स है, तो हमें उसका हर सपोर्टिंग में एक्सटर्नल डॉक्यूमेंट्स विल हैव टू फाइंड आउट. Otherwise, it will have like it may have reporting implications as well if you are not able to find out those external documents also.
ग्रेट ग्रेट ग्रेट। तो स्टूडेंट्स आपने आज के लेक्चर में, आज के सेशन में आपने बहुत गेन किया है। मैंने देखा है मैडम ने आपको बहुत सारे डॉक्यूमेंट्स दिखाए हैं, बहुत सारी नई चीजें बताई हैं। और ये नई चीजें आपको अपने पास डॉक्यूमेंट करके रखनी चाहिए जो कि आपके ऑडिटिंग के एग्जामिनेशन में भी आपको बहुत हेल्प करेंगी। तो स्टूडेंट्स आप ये सारी चीजें नेक्स्ट लेक्चर में मैडम और बहुत सारे आपको डॉक्यूमेंट्स दिखाने वाली हैं। तो मैं इसी के साथ ही मैडम आपका थैंक्स करता हूँ। थैंक यू केनाज
Thank you,
मैडम।
sir.
एंड स्टूडेंट्स आपका भी थैंक्स करता हूँ। और मैं आपको हमेशा ये कहूंगा कि आप नेक्स्ट लेक्चर में थोड़ा सा तैयारी करके भी आओ, पढ़ के भी आओ कि ऑडिट स्ट्रेटजी डॉक्यूमेंट और ऑडिट प्लानिंग, ऑडिट प्रोग्राम और इनसे रिलेटेड डॉक्यूमेंट्स क्या हो सकते हैं। ठीक है ना। तो वो आप उससे क्वेरीज भी हमसे पूछो लास्ट के, ताकि हम 10-15 मिनट क्वेरीज भी ले पाएंगे। थैंक यू स्टूडेंट्स, थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Thank you.
यस यस यस, टेक्निकल टीम यू कैन एंड द सेशन। थैंक यू टेक्निकल टीम।